Good evening and welcome to Crossroads. A shift is taking place behind the scenes with former President Donald Trump because, folks, on the surface we see his mugshot, we see him getting indicted. Republicans, they're debating over whether he was right to challenge the 2020 elections. The corporate media, they've sidelined him. But look, behind all of this, governments around the world are preparing for what could possibly be a Trump victory. They are readying themselves for a possible return of President Donald Trump. And it's not just me saying it. Wall Street Journal right here. They just published a piece that may have taken some people by surprise, let's say. It ran with the headline, "The world is contemplating a second Trump administration." And it states that while we're still more than a year away from the presidential elections, quote, allies and adversaries around the world have already begun to contemplate and even plan for the return of Donald Trump to the White House. Now, it notes this is causing anxiety for the leaders of the world, as you might suspect. All the way from Paris to Tokyo, they say. Now, the piece suggests, it's actually, I'd say, maybe even some of the Americas as well. But the piece suggests that Trump would have little interest in countering the expansionist agendas of Russia and China, as they claim at least. And on the contrary, it claims that Russia and China actually view Trump as possibly someone they can make a deal with. It adds that on the other hand, quote, nationalist and populist politicians also voice support for Trump's ambitions. Now, many of these people were not willing to go on record. They wouldn't use their names when doing interviews. But Wall Street Journal does claim that it spoke with policymakers and politicians around the world and notes they believe a return of Trump would maybe be a real possibility at this point. It actually doesn't end there. That Wall Street Journal article warning about the return of Trump, that came on the heels of another very odd story. In Canada, the government there, across the whole thing, in fact, is also apparently worried. They believe Trump could come back, and they're notably concerned this could cause a so-called far-right shift in America. They will have a seismic shift all through Canada. Now, just a couple days before, again, with all this, right? It said that Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, is considering a so-called game plan for how the country's going to respond. They're warning of a possible far-right authoritarian shift, their words, right? Coming into play after the elections are over, meaning, well, Trump might win. Joly told a Montreal radio station they are, quote, certainly working on scenarios. And the preparations for such scenarios are not just in one office of the Canadian government. It's not just the Foreign Affairs Office. It looks like they're readying the entire country for the possibility that Trump could win. She said this, quote, I will work with my colleagues and with the mayors, with the provincial premiers, with the business community, with the unions, with everyone in the country so that we are ready regardless of the election outcome. And they're talking about the elections right here in the United States. Now look, of course they frame this from the angle of a political extremist threat, the far right, but they also make clear what they're actually referring to. They draw an analogy to what it was like working with the Trump administration last time. It seems like they view Trump not just as a candidate and not even just as the potential next president of the United States. They view Donald Trump as being the leader of a global shift everywhere in the world. It's the rise of the conservatives. It's the people who are just fed up with socialism and globalist agendas. It's the freedom convoy that they freaked so much about. The Canadian truckers who had the military called on them for protesting against vax mandates. Now, Joly said this, the other aspect of the question is more about knowing how we as a democracy are able to thwart the growth of the far right in our country, because it's happening in the United States, it's happening in Europe. And remember, far right these days generally means maybe you believe in classical education for your kids or something like that. Maybe this is why all those global leaders, notably that Wall Street Journal reported on from Paris to Tokyo, are so concerned. Culture is changing. People everywhere are rejecting the agenda, as they note is happening in Canada, but they say it's a global shift. And just like President Biden has been warning in America when it comes to his narratives on the so-called MAGA extremists who are overtaking the Republican Party from within, Jolie said the same thing is happening in Canada. She said this, "One can't be naive here." And she adds, "It's happening right now with us. We know that there is certainly a radicalization of the Canadian Conservative Party." Well, everyone, that's it for YouTube. For the rest of the episode, come join us on Epoch TV, where we have some epic things to talk about. Sorry, I'm a dad. I can make dad jokes. We have a lot of good stuff to talk about. We're talking about the third parties coming up right now, the possibility of independence, what it means with the No Labels Party coming about, what's going to happen to RFK Jr. Things are really shaking up at the polls right now, and there's a lot of stuff people aren't really discussing. We could have a Ross Perot moment, I'm calling it, when it comes to the 2024 elections. Also, did you know that Joe Biden was allegedly using different pseudonyms, including possibly in some communications related to Hunter Biden, let's say? Republicans are trying to get access to those documents right now using these pseudonyms. And speculation, we'll see what comes out from it, but this is tied to their corruption investigations. Could be pretty significant. We'll be talking about all of this, a lot more, over on Epoch TV. And remember, there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about on YouTube. Even Twitter, X, even they are censoring us now. In fact, they just canceled one of the Epoch TV's documentaries. Pretty wild stuff. But again, it's why we have Epoch TV. It's why we are taking steps to protect our ability to tell the news. And again, folks, you want to support our journalism, you want to get access to really fantastic journalism, come join us on Epoch TV. It's only 25 cents right now, flash sale going on. Come over to Epoch TV, and I'll see you there.
People from 160 countries illegally cross the U.S.-Mexico border and give themselves up to Border Patrol. But what about the ones who evade Border Patrol? These are known as the gotaways.
You can safely assume that anybody that went through the extra effort to avoid U.S. Border Patrol was not an asylum seeker by default.
It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but somewhere down the road, if somebody rapes and kills somebody, and we find out that they came through here on my watch, that's unacceptable.
These men had surrounded my house. They were banging on my back door. They were banging on my front door.
You can't understand it unless you're out here seeing it every day. 21 dead bodies on the property.
Code 3 response.
Is it wrong to ask people to come to your front door of your home? Then why would it be wrong to ask people to come to the front door of our nation?
Their primary goal is to circumvent the checkpoints, go undetected.
People that do not want to surrender, those are going to be the potential terrorists, the criminals, the real threat to the U.S.
We were hoping the federal government would step in and do something, but they didn't.
We have no clue who they are or where they're going. That's the scary part.